I'm really pleased to be here. It's the first time I've been to Clayfest, and I've just had a wonderful week. It's been absolutely great, and so well organised as well. It's one of the best organised eco events I've ever been to, so it's great. I'm going to take a slight departure here in that I could probably talk about some of the projects that we've done, which I will mention briefly. I'm an architect anyway in Northern Ireland, in County Down. I used to be a professor of architecture at Queen's in Belfast, but now I'm the token man in a woman-only architect's office in County Down. So I say I make the tea, but I also do some consultancy work through the practice, and doing that kind of work has led me to get involved in engaging with the mainstream construction industry. And people have already mentioned today, this afternoon particularly, the issues about the building regulations and how they're not really suitable for the kinds of things we're building here. And I'm going to talk about some of those issues and why it's like that, and what the problems. Even though I would not pretend to know a lot about cob building, I did become very friendly with this chap who built this magical cob house in Oxfordshire, which was built without any planning and building regs approval. One of the wonderful stories about this house was that the local hunt was going round, and the story is that the fox took shelter in the cob house, and so all the dogs went through the windows and did a lot of damage to the building. So the hunt then paid for him to have, because previously there were really rubbish recycled windows he'd used, so they paid for him to have nice new windows out the house, which is rather nice. So I think most people by now are familiar with the whole issue of the advantages of natural building, and I move through a whole range of different natural building materials, not just earth-based materials. And one of the key things is that we all understand, unless all the people here would understand vapor permeability and breathability, and that's something that we understand creates healthier and better buildings. But unfortunately that is not how the mainstream construction industry views building construction. There's a company, you've probably never heard of this company. They're called Kingspan, a little insignificant business that started up in a garage in Ireland and now has factories all over the world. And this is their lovely new managing director. And they produced a report a few years ago called Breathability, a white paper. Now this was actually the main paper. The paper was essentially an attack on a lovely guy called Neil May, and because they hate Neil May even more than they hate me, and they have convinced pretty well mainstream industry and the people who write the building regulations that breathability is what they call a red herring. It doesn't exist. It is of no value or benefit in buildings whatsoever, and this is based on a pretty dodgy study but done by a bunch of quite reputable academics at Cambridge University. Needless to say, Kingspan somewhat distorted the results of their study, but essentially this has become the backup to the idea that buildings can't breathe, and what we have to do is install mechanical ventilation and heat recovery systems. And the way the building regulations are moving, particularly in Ireland, is that MVHR systems, which are rubbish and we would never install one in a building, will become compulsory and everybody will have to start using them, which is a very worrying development. And part of this I blame on the passive house movement. Now there's lots of lovely people in the passive house movement, and some of them have built passive houses out of hemp and straw bale and so on, but most of them don't. And it essentially comes from I think a largely male obsession with having gadgets and technology. I've slightly censored this gadget magazine here just so it doesn't cause any offence, but I come up against this all the time, that people come to us, we get potential clients and they say we want to build an eco house, And we say, oh, what do you mean? Oh, well, we want to have solar panels, we want to have a air source heat pump, we want to have underfloor this, and we want to have this, that, and the other. And all they can talk about is technology, gadgets. They don't know anything about building in a natural or ecological way. And you end up with stuff like this in your house, lots of pipes, which one of the great people whose influence on me was a marvellous guy called Christopher Day, who wrote a lot of books, one called Places of the Soul, which I would recommend. And Chris used to argue that mechanical ventilation positively ionizes the air. And nobody talks about that in this respect, but actually negative ionized air is better for your health. But if you pump out all the air coming into your building through lots of plastic and metal pipes, then that's not good for your health. Came across this recently. This is being promoted as the way to go. 3D printed houses. That's what we're all going to get in the future. But to do 3D printing, it has to be made out of plastic. So this is a demonstration house in France, which is made of insulated concrete formwork, which is then covered in delicious spray foam. And I've had a number of people speak to me recently saying that they think this is absolutely wonderful and this is the way to go. I currently have got a complaint into the Advertising Standards Authority about the claims made about spray foam insulation, because it's particularly popular in Northern Ireland. But spray foam insulation is probably responsible for more health and deaths than any other insulation material that's used. Applicators have been killed in fires, for instance, because this stuff is extremely flammable. It's also extremely toxic. And spray foam people, you can sue me for saying that if you want, because I'm quite happy to justify it if there's anybody here. But what's happened is that this whole drive to make buildings as energy efficient as possible, which we should be doing to save the planet, supposedly, has put the whole thing into the hands of the main big four chemical companies in the world, one of which is BASF. This is their factory in Ludwigshafen, which blew up recently. There's a fire in the isocyanate plant. 2 firefighters were killed. Got Dow Chemicals, who have a very bad track record in relation to the Bhopal disaster, and we've got DuPont and Monsanto, and all these companies are merging and coming up with things. I saw an advert the other day for Agent Orange Corn, would you believe? And one of the big problems that people run into, and it's already been addressed this afternoon, is this issue of meeting the building regulations. So you've already seen a picture of this house, which has got polystyrene in it, in an effort to come up with a certain energy standard. And then here we've got this building which is currently shortlisted for the RIBA Sterling Prize, which is allegedly a round earth building where they brought people from Australia to build it out of round earth with just a little bit of cement in it. Because obviously there's nobody in the UK can do round earth, so that's one of the big problems, that people won't accept that these materials will work. And we're starting to see a bit of a change of an attitude. People are becoming aware of plastic pollution, and there's loads and loads of it, and obviously some of it can be put into this wonderful structure which some of you will have seen up the way, but it's a massive problem, particularly from the construction industry. And I don't have time to go into this in detail, but I think you get the point. The other thing which has influenced people a lot is the Grenfell disaster. So we will get clients coming to us saying, I don't want any of those materials in my building that burned on Grenfell. But of course you can pick up Celotex very cheap now because they're trying to get rid of it because of what happened. One of the big mistakes that people are making about Grenfell is that they are assuming that this is a problem with high-rise buildings, but there are lots of low-rise buildings, and increasingly Governments are promoting the idea, and sadly, my friend Jeremy Corbyn made a speech the other day promoting the use of these kinds of insulation materials with prefabricated off-site construction. This is using PIR insulation, the same thing that killed people on Grenfell, but this is for low-rise buildings. This was a fire test done in Denmark a few years ago, in which these SIP construction buildings are shown to burn within about 5 minutes, so you've got very little chance to survive a fire. We're building a lot of schools with this stuff as well. The other amazing thing is they're using this flammable stuff in historic buildings. So the Mackintosh School of Art building, one of my most favourite buildings, is burned down for the second time, and the Architects Journal have exposed the fact that they used PIR insulation in that building. Goodness knows how historic Scotland allowed that to happen. And then we had a big fire in a historic building which we converted into a Primark store in Belfast just the other day, and again you can see the fire is in the roof, and guess what the insulation was that was used in there. Just to come back to spray foam, I discovered the other day that they've been spray foaming Trump Tower so I thought that made a nice connection with a very good book called Losing Our Minds. There's a wonderful woman in France, Barbara Dominic, who's written a number of books about the impact of the toxic cocktail, all the toxic materials which are now polluting our buildings, and the effect that it has on the development of children and so on. So moving on rapidly so you don't get too depressed. I'll just want to mention smoke toxicity. This is even worse. All these chemical foam materials which gets used in buildings give off vast amounts of toxic smoke. There are no regulations to control this. They use flame retardants, but the flame retardants themselves are just as toxic and just as damaging. They're what are known as endocrine disrupting chemicals. So if you want to know about this, go and talk to your local vet. The vets know more about this because there's actually been more research done on the effect of toxic chemicals in buildings on cats than there has on people. This is a study done at Stockholm University. We have no indoor air quality performance certificate. There are virtually no regulations in the building regulations to control indoor air quality. If there were, then natural buildings would have a huge advantage over conventional buildings, but those regulations, even where they do exist, they're not enforced. I decided to try and put together a book about this and started doing research, which actually I didn't think there was much evidence about the links between health problems and building materials, but I was surprised how much actually was there. And if you want to get thoroughly depressed, then I still, some people have bought my book in the bookshop today. I've got one left, so it's disturbing stuff actually, and I didn't realise just quite how bad it was myself. Ireland, of course, is one of the best places in Europe for production of toxic insulation materials. This is what I call the Irish Bermuda Triangle. So you've got it just sneaks into Meath and into Leitrim and Monaghan, but it's mainly Cavan, and they're all there. Where are they getting the stuff from? Is there an isocyanate mine in Cavan that I didn't know about? In fact, what's happening now is because, and again, I haven't had the time to go into the detail about this because we've been doing a lot of research on where these toxic chemicals are coming from. A lot of the factories producing these toxic materials for foam insulation have been shut down in Europe. So guess where they're getting it from? China. And in China, they've detected a 25% increase in emissions of CFCs recently. It's been well publicised, this, and they've tracked that down. This is a fantastic organisation I'm hoping to do some work with because they have undercover investigators. So I think you lot can keep it secret, but we're going to be tracing where these chemicals are coming from. So if anybody's travelling through Cavan, happens to notice a tanker with isocyanates in it, would you please take a photograph and send it to me, because we want, we want to know. I guess they might be coming in through Warren Point or Dublin Port, these chemicals, probably coming all the way from China in nice steel drums like this, which actually is illegal for transporting isocyanates. They're meant to be in certain special kind of tanker, and then they mix them with lots of other nice toxic chemicals to produce foam insulation. Sorry, that's gone too fast. So I've been working on hemp lime. I'm only going to briefly mention projects we're doing. This is our hemp cottage in County Down, and if you're interested in hemp lime, do go and visit the Rediscovery project in Ballymun, which has got fantastic walls of hempcrete. But I'm kind of concerned about, even in terms of lime, a relationship with the multinational companies, which certainly did a lot of damage to the hemp lime industry, which again is a long story which I don't have time to go into. So we started looking at whether we could do the same sort of thing but with clay, and up to now we've been doing experiments with clay powder, which I'm very pleased with. There are quite a few people who've been trying out things with hemp and earth, and I'm very excited about the fact that we've been shortlisted for a prize called the William Sutton Prize for the work we've been doing on hemp and clay, and I've got to go and make a presentation in London on October the 15th. So I'm going to be taking a suitcase in my hand luggage full of hemp and clay, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens when I go through security, because I'm just going over to London for the day. So this is what we've been doing in here, which some of you will have seen. I'm sure all of you will make it over there. I mean, the thing I enjoy particularly about doing this kind of work is the fun. Yeah, this is my penultimate slide. This is a project that we worked on at Carmarthen in North Wales. This is a retreat centre run by a guy called Eric Madden, and he's got every kind of natural building on the site that you could imagine: cob, straw bale, roundhouse, all sorts of things, and nearly all of which were built without planning permission. And eventually the place is so successful that they decided to give him planning permission retrospectively. He didn't have a hempcrete house, so we built this with a whole bunch of volunteers, none of whom had ever done anything with hempcrete before, in the coldest, wettest day that I've had for a long time at Easter. But it's great. The building's looking lovely. It's performing very well. And it's just great fun doing it with people. That's the thing that I really most enjoy. Actually, this is a penultimate. So this is just to say that I see what we're doing in terms of natural building as engaging in a war. We're in a war with these sort of people. We're certainly in a war with this lady. She's our political leader in Northern Ireland, who thinks that God created the earth 4,000 years ago, and that fracking's a good idea. And I think it's political what we're doing. It's not just nice and getting our hands dirty with mud, but it's more significant than that. I've been lucky enough to do some work in South Africa. This is a soup kitchen in Kailicha Township, just outside Cape Town, run by this amazing woman who feeds 300 people a day with food that she manages to collect. And believe it or not, she didn't have a proper kitchen, so she was going to be closed down by environmental health. So a whole bunch of people got together, and we've built a hempcrete soup kitchen, which is great. And I'm very influeed by the South Africans and how they engage in their politics in a much more sort of sensitive way, really. And they do lots of dancing and singing as well when they're doing it, which is great. So thank you very much.